Perfect. All right, now I'm going to let everybody in.
Thank you so much.
Oh, we got a good.
Really nice group. Look
Yeah,
at all these familiar faces
JResponse.
and names coming in.
Thank you guys all for coming. This is great to see so many new faces and names here. Give it a couple more minutes and then we'll get started.
Sounds good. Everybody's coming in.
As an outlet.
We got a really nice group today. It's so nice to see everybody.
Oh, great. Jesse, whenever you're ready, I think we should start because I think it's 5 after the hour. Oops.
Well, thank you guys so much for joining us. It is so wonderful to see like 26 people in here already. We are so fortunate today that we are able to switch it up a little bit and have a little bit of a panel discussion based off of what's been going on the past 7 months. What have we been experiencing? And not only that, how are we moving forward? So we are so thankful to everyone for being here and our panelists for being able to join us and help speak. I'm going to let Jesse get into a little bit more of who they are and what's going on with that part of our meeting. I also wanted to take a moment and provide some options coming up for this group. We will be, there's a Narcan training coming up. And we also, so that information went out. And I apologize, my technology is not happy today. So I am a little bit all over the place, but we have that. And then I also want to tell you a little bit about an opportunity coming up for emergency preparedness training, assisting people with disabilities in emergencies. And that information, I believe, has gone out as well, and we'll send that out again after this meeting. But just some really amazing opportunities that JCCA is putting on and helping to support, and we're just so thankful for that. So I'm going to hand it over to Jesse to get us started.
Jesse, can I hijack for a quick second?
Mark.
I'm sorry. We'll return to your regularly scheduled programming, but there's so many JResponders on here. I'm scheduled to speak at the end, but I'm pushing myself to speak now just to say hello and to let you know computer problems. I forgot my laptop and so I'm doing this through my phone. And also just to elevate a couple of things. One, there are a few of us, including Jess, that are going to be in Israel in a couple of weeks to do a JResponse volunteer service in Israel. It was limited because we're doing this with birthright in terms of the age. And we're going to continue to find ways to do other deployments to Israel and other places where everyone would be involved, but I just wanted to elevate that. And I also promised my colleague Leah Garber that we would elevate the launch of our Israel Academy as well, so we can promote Israel and education to all JCC professionals, which we hope will be helpful to folks on this call and folks that we're navigating with over time. So you'll see me back at the end, but I just wanted to say hello and say those couple of things. And it's great to see so many JResponders together. Jesse, back to you.
Thank you, Mark. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce our panelists. And then, which I have not told the panelists, I am then going to tag you so that you show up and take up the screen. So get ready for that, friends. So first we have Len Connolly, who is the Senior Director of Facilities at Jewish Silicon Valley, with 38 years of experience working with the Jewish community in North America. During his decades of security leadership, Len has served as an original JResponder peer group member and completed the Department of Homeland Security training courses. So give me a second to pin Len for everybody. Next up, we have Naomi Kramer, who is the Director of Operational and Program Excellence, as well as the General Manager of Fitness at the Miles Nadal JCC in Toronto, Canada. She completed her JResponse training in the winter of 2001. So everybody's
21.
I'm sorry?
Go ahead.
So everybody say hello to Naomi. And last but certainly not least, I have my friend Joseph, who was part of my JResponse cohort, a friend who I eventually look forward to meeting in person at some point. Joseph is currently the facilities director and facilities and security director at the Asheville, North Carolina JCC. But before joining the JCC team, Joseph worked in the art field, house building, and construction. Joseph has been with the Asheville JCC family for over 10 years. So let me add Joseph to the group. And we're going to hear from each of you individually. So I'm going to let you go in whichever order you feel you are called to answer. If you wouldn't mind first introducing yourself, and now that I already shared your connection to JResponse, maybe you can share a little bit more.
Can I go first? Can you hear me? Okay. So I'm Joseph, and I'm the Facility and Security Director at the Asheville JCC. I was a parent here before I joined the team, so I've been involved with this JCC for, probably 16 years. And when I first started, I was the facility director, and after a year or two, the title of security director was added. So I've learned a lot about security over the years. So Jesse, you want me to give the little 2 minutes?
We're actually, we'll touch on that a little bit in a little bit. If you could just, anything else you'd like us to know about about Asheville or JResponse?
So I was in the original cohort, the inaugural cohort too, with Len. Len and I go way back. And yeah, I've done various other JResponse trainings, and the Asheville JCC has, I think, 5 JResponse people here. Thank you.
As I already was introduced, I'm Len Connolly. I've been with the organization for 38 years, both in Canada and the United States. One of the things that I do bring to the table that I don't know if everybody else has, I have dual citizenship. So I'm able to work in both countries if I choose to. Joseph and I were on the original JResponse in Memphis. And a lot of things that we talked about during Memphis that we thought never would happen have happened. And still thankful for that training.
Hi, I'm Naomi Kramer. I also have dual citizenship. So Len, you and I can go back and forth across the border a lot. I'm in Toronto, Canada, and as Jesse mentioned, I completed my JResponse training in the winter of 2021, and it was all online. So like the opposite of what you guys had, we sort of made connections as much as possible through Zoom, which I know all of us are well versed now. But a little bit about my background and why JResponse was so appealing to me. I have worked in aquatics in my past, and anybody else who's worked in aquatics knows that emergency response is one of our big things that we practice. And so it was appealing for that reason. And then once I completed my JResponse training, I've also completed JReady training through the Jewish agency in Israel. And that was also online. And that had to do with a lot of disaster management and crisis response. So for whatever reason, that kind of thing appeals to me, where I can be helpful and support people. So that's me. One little bit about Toronto, we have 3 JCCs in the Greater Toronto area. Our JCC of Miles Nadal is in downtown Toronto. The other 2 are a bit more suburban. And so that sort of will come up. That's a bit of a teaser for some of the things that we'll talk about today. Thanks.
Naomi, you did such a great job. We're going to keep it back with you. If you would share one example of how JResponse training or some action or initiative around readiness, relief, recovery, and resilience has come into play or been helpful in supporting your staff and community since October 7th.
So I decided to tweak this question to one of my favorite things that we did, one of the most meaningful things, I think, of our response. So being downtown, we have diverse, different communities that we're sort of dealing with. And one of our programming areas is Israeli Connection. We have a very large and vibrant Israeli community, including, because we have a lot of hospitals locally, a lot of medical fellows. And we had a lot of new Israelis to the community who weren't maybe necessarily going to stay in Toronto, but they had just moved in September. So obviously October 7th happened. And I and a few other staff, including the person who is in charge of our Israeli Connection program, quickly mobilized and created an opportunity on Sunday evening, October 8th, for the Israeli community to come together. And this was obviously like challenging in many ways, because the adults in the community who sort of understood a little bit more of what was going on needed space to sort of meet and convene. And then they also had their children present. And normally, you know, they would all babysit each other's children, but we wanted to really dedicate some time and space to the adults. So we brought in many mental health professionals who were Israeli, so they could really express themselves in their native language. And we brought in childcare. I helped with childcare, and occupied the children so they could have a bit of a normal moment where they were playing and didn't have to worry about their parents being upset and everything else. And of course, there was food, because there's always food. And so we convened this group and gave them an opportunity to start to process what they were dealing with. And in particular, there was one family who had just moved the month earlier from the South, and the father of that family was in a unit where he lost 4 of his best friends on October 7th. And so he had not only wasn't comfortable in the community, but also was dealing with his own grief very far away, feeling away from family. And that was just one story of the many that came out that night.
That's amazing. I love that your community came together that way. How about you, Len?
Sorry. One of the things I that was really emphasized in the original training was awareness of the people around you, how everybody is affected in different ways with stress. And I did write some notes, which I normally don't. Colleague awareness, being aware of somebody who might be becoming overwhelmed, trying to support where we can, creating a plan to alleviate overload. And we do have a great team here, right from the COO right down to the person who is at the front desk. And we tend to delegate. We have constant training here. In fact, after October 7th, we decided we were going to become part of the CERT program here in our local area, Community Emergency Response Team, which we have 9 members on, from our staff in the local area. Again, showing the community our support for them and having the community come in and be hosted by our facility. That was one of the big things we did, and it actually did a great build. It also involved the police, the local fire department. You know, they know our building. That's one of the tricks that we learned from JResponse, inclusion.
Wonderful, Joseph.
So I want to start off by saying that Asheville is a somewhat of a smaller city compared to a lot of you, and we're a pretty liberal city, and our JCC is fairly liberal. And I tend to look at things through the lens of security because I'm also the security director. So one of the things that I think we did well was readiness. And because I'm security, I'm in constant communication with our local law enforcement. We have a local FBI office and a secure community network. We have a pretty close connection with them. And because we're a small community, we have really only about 5 or 6 Jewish organizations in town. But we have a group that meets once a month, Community Security Task Force. And so, when October 7th happened, we immediately were communicating with all the Jewish organizations in town and all the stakeholders. So we didn't have to create a crisis team or a task force to communicate. We already had those connections. And I'd say that's probably what we did best. And we immediately started to offer some programs. We, like Naomi, we also have a group of Israelis in town, and they asked if they could come, gather at the JCC. A lot of them probably didn't know each other. And so we hosted them very early on. And then we hosted some educational seminars for our staff to learn about the history of Israel and Palestine. And I think that's what we did well. And I'll stop there.
Thank you, Joseph. So my next question for you is, what has been the greatest challenge to your community since October 7th? And how have you tried to address that? And whenever you're ready, any one of you can jump in first.
I'll go since I'm still unmuted. It's surprisingly, I think one of the best things I've learned from JResponse is the resiliency, the pillar of resilience. And I've loved getting to learn about all those strategies and techniques. And sadly, I think that's the one thing that we really didn't do well during the last 6 months. And I think that's because we were so in the thick of things that it didn't occur to me to extend that to the staff. Besides some of the meetings we had, we did have a meeting where it was a facilitated meeting on how to have courageous conversations or difficult conversations. We did do that. But the biggest challenge was being in the moment and not being able to think outside the moment and say, oh, I think we need some other resources. And then I think the other thing that was a surprise was the internal conflicts. I don't want to get into politics here. I won't. And like Jess said, we have 26 people on this Zoom, and there's probably 26 different opinions of what's going on. But I think myself and our administration was surprised at some of the internal conflicts we had. We had some employees leave quit because they weren't happy with how we were handling things one way or the other. And for a while, it was like we couldn't do anything right. And we had some, well, I don't want to go more into it, but that was hard to deal with and not something we were really prepared for. But we learned. And then I think coming back to one of the 4 pillars of relief and recovery, what helped us was to fall back on what was really important to us as a JCC, which was our mission statement and what the things that we do best, which are our children's programming and our aquatics programming and just community building. And so the recovery was kind of getting centered again and not being buffeted by all the winds of change out there and all the loud voices.
Our biggest challenge, and it's still continuing today, is the trust of the community and what we're doing, to continue to build it, asking us where we're going, what direction we're going, what kind of security measures we're going to plan on doing, what kind of grants we're going to write. We've actually partnered with NICRIC, which is Northern California Information Gathering Center. It's a Department of Homeland Security. We've had seminars here to try to explain to some people within our local schools and schools to give them information, give them tools to find out information for their own, so that they might not have to wait on our community to give it to them. They're getting it direct from the pipeline. Education, tools is the biggest thing. Was our easiest way to get the respect back from the community and how we're doing with things. Biggest thing is educating the community what we're doing, best practices, whether it be from the local law enforcement or whether it be from SCN. We hosted an SCN vulnerability night here. We had a guest speaker come in from Pittsburgh and spoke to us, again, the local schools, as to what kind of direction we're going into. The big thing again, is what I started with, is trust. I think we have the trust of the community that we work for. They see us out there. They see our connection with local law enforcement. I have not only the police chief, but the captain on speed dial. When I called just to say I wanted to talk to them or send them a text, I get a phone call to make sure that we're okay. What the community is also seeing is training going on here in our facility by local law enforcement, inviting them in. Not all communities are, as I say, blue friendly. We are, because we are kind of in an isolation, and it's a relationship that we need to have in this area, because we are, with our location, we're just off the highway. So we're an exit off the freeway, and we are a vulnerable target.
So a lot of our challenges were similar to what both Joseph and Lynn mentioned. Being downtown, again, we attract these diverse communities, and there are many people who don't feel comfortable around people in uniform, police and security guards, like Len mentioned. And so we went from this moment of, we don't have the police in our building, please come in and feel welcome, to, yes, police come to our building. And so how do we balance that security and that welcoming? Because for many marginalized people, institutionalized Jewish locations, it's like there's this barrier to entry. And so how do we sort of balance those things? And yet we needed to maintain a safe and secure space for our community as a whole. And one other piece that we've sort of dealt with that has been challenging is we're actually right across the street from the Deputy Prime Minister's office. So effectively the Vice President. And anytime somebody has an opinion about anything, and sometimes the opinions are unclear, they come and protest outside the Deputy Prime Minister's office. And not long after October 7th, there was a massive demonstration where from what we understood, the target was the Deputy Prime Minister's office, but then the entire population of that protest turned and started chanting some really terrible things towards our building, which is really terrifying for the staff, the parents of the students in our building, because we have early childhood, we have a Jewish day school, and then our members, just anybody in that building. It felt very scary in the moment. And there were a lot more protesters than there were police and security guards. And so those were some of the things we were trying to balance. We still want to welcome people in, and yet we want to keep them safe. And then Joseph mentioned differing opinions within the staff community. We have differing opinions even within our JCC community. There are definitely all different views within both our Jewish and our non-Jewish community. And we want to try and balance all of those things. And I don't know if you're using the same terminology, but of the 3 H's that have come out within this conflict of Hamas, hostages, and hatred, I think we can really make a huge dent on the hatred piece on that local community, because the more we welcome everybody in, the less hate there is overall. And our federation here has mentioned that what is the best way, what is the measure for when somebody is less likely to be anti-Semitic is if they have a Jewish friend. And so our focus of still trying to welcome in all of our different communities, Jewish and not, and try to make people feel as safe as possible has been that sort of balancing act that we're working on.
Thank you so much. I'm going to ask one last question, but those of you who are on the Zoom, if you have questions that you'd like to ask Len, Naomi, and Joseph, please feel free to throw those in the chat. And so you have a few minutes. My last question for you all is, what do you need help with your community going forward, and how can this community be helpful?
Like I mentioned before, my personal request is, how can I get outside myself when I'm in a conflict? And probably a lot of that just comes from experience, but I wanted to get more into the resiliency portion of JResponse, and I failed to do it. So just ways to, get outside yourself during the crisis, and that's why I love what we're doing today, because we're taking a pause, we're reflecting on what happened. So, how to get that sooner rather than later. Yeah.
One of the things that I've mentioned in my little talk is trust. It's to continue trust of the community, maintaining the support of the community, not only with the respect, but also funding. How do we get funding to get them to their goal, to our mission, to provide a safe environment? People coming through the door and people using the facility, if they want something that's going to be secure, it might take a few more dollars to do it. And know what that money's being spent on. Transparency is very important in our community, because everybody can see. We make ourselves very visible. We are not invisible to the people that we look after here, whether it be the preschooler that walks down the hallway, whether it be the 95-year-old man who's just coming from the swimming pool. We are a family here. We are here to look after each other. And again, having the trust of the community.
So I think continuing to create a safe space, especially right now for the Jewish community to have that safe space where they can go and just not have to worry about what everyone around thinks about them being Jewish. Particularly, I know Toronto has made the news a few times for some of the things going on up here. We need to continue to support our Israeli community. I can't imagine how challenging it is to be far from home while everything is happening back in your home. And ideally, open dialogue with all the different voices and opinions, because maybe it's the naive part of me, but I genuinely think that most people come from a good place, especially our community here at Miles Nadal. And so I think it's less about who's right and who's wrong, and it's more about finding ways to understand each other. And I think our community really needs that, because there's been some division within our community up here. And in terms of support for all of us, I actually think opportunities like this and different opportunities to discuss some of the challenges that we're having are really important, because I think sometimes, even though Mark educated us very well, I think sometimes we forget to take care of ourselves. That whole concept of the oxygen mask, putting it on yourself before you take care of someone else. We all get so wrapped up in the doing of things that I think having a space to, whether it's commiserate or support each other or whatever, I think that's really, really important. And I noticed somebody said in the chat that it's nice to hear that we're all sort of dealing with the same things. So it gives us a moment to realize that we're sort of all in this together, even if we're in opposite ends of the continent, that we're all sort of struggling the same way. And maybe there are people out there that have these brilliant solutions or just supportive ideas that can help.
So it looks like we have a lot of wonderful comments in the chat, and everybody's very grateful for everybody for sharing. But a question that has come up is, as we prepare for Yom Ha'atzmaut, what are you doing differently than in the past to ensure that everyone feels welcome and included in events that are planned, as well as safe and secure?
Well, with us, we are promoting it as much as we can within the building and within the community, probably more than last year. We want our people on site. Of course, the biggest topics have been security. What kind of security are we going to have? And I just basically have to say one thing. Well, the police chief's going to join us. The captain's going to join us. We've invited everybody. We do have security on site. We actually have armed security on site. People are aware of that. And we are hosting it in the most safe area that we can. That being said, you know, we're going to be very diligent on how we do things, but try to be inviting at the same time. Innocuous security. So, I mean, that's what we're trying to do. We want the kids to come in and play. We were putting it in a couple of different areas within the facility, secure areas. But we're not running and hiding. We're going to make sure that we are celebrating the birthday.
So most of our events around Yom Ha'atzmaut are community-wide events. We're trying really hard to work together with our community rather than having many competing events. And as Len mentioned, everything that we are doing in consultation with the police and with our own local community security. In fact, everything we do these days, we do in consultation with the police and our local community security. You know, we're actually right down the street from University of Toronto, who has an encampment, and there's just like a lot going on in downtown. And so we don't want to hide, I agree, but also we need to be protective of the people that come through our doors. And some of the events are happening a little bit farther from downtown, just so that way people feel a little bit safer. So.
We are just having more and more, you know, hiring off-duty security. We increased that budget, you know, this previous year. So just more security. And I like what Lynn said, sort of innocuous security, but we also want it to be in plain sight. So have people, you know, passing by the building know that we have security, and, you know, as much as we can.
I just
So-
wanted to add, sorry, that a lot of our community events, we're doing this thing now where people sign up, and only once they've signed up for whatever it is, do we tell them where the location is. Because we've had a lot of issues with protests at specific locations when we're open about where we're hosting things. And so, you know, sometimes there's some cloak and dagger associated with some of our events. Unfortunately, as much as we'd like to be loud and proud, you know, safety is the most important.
Naomi, that actually lends really well to a follow-up question that I have. You said you're right by University of Toronto. I am not even going to pretend that I am aware of anybody else's geographical location when it comes to universities. But are you seeing crossover between things happening in universities happening at your JCCs? And how's that being handled?
Not so far, thank goodness. But and our encampment is very, very new. And has by and large mostly been peaceful, although anyways. But what we've seen a lot of is the police have been around a lot. So our former executive director came to see me the other day and she said, "Why is there a police car out front?" And I said, "Well, first of all, they check on us a lot, but also the encampment had just started that day. So they're really around a lot. They have been talking to campus security a lot. Our community security has been involved. And so far, thank goodness, nothing has sort of affected our location so far.
Jesse, can we hear from other people if they've had success in implementing resiliency practices and stuff?
Yes, I was just going to get to that. Perfect segue. I'm actually going to turn it over to Mark, who is going to move into that area. Did either you or Len want to have any issues with universities before we move on?
We have one in town, but thankfully I've not heard much rumblings over there.
Thank you. Mark, you want to take over?
Sure. Well, you know, we have three excellent panelists in Naomi and Len and Joseph, who I think have shared tremendous insights that I want to summarize, but then I want to do that while opening it up to the 30 panelists that are in this call. That we've all had this experience, this, you know, to use an analogy from when JResponse was created, this is a hurricane that did not just hit Houston. Or you know, a shooting that does not just take place in Pittsburgh, although even Tree of Life synagogue shooting affected all of us and some of us deployed there. This is something that is impacting all of us in different ways. And I'd like to say, though, that this is cloaked in partisanship. JResponse in itself and taking care of each other during times of stress is not partisan, or we strive it for it to be nonpartisan. So I'm hearing from our panel the importance of gathering, the importance of preparation, whether that is physical security or psychological or emotional, which I think bleeds into the resilience, focusing on one's inner strength and practicing that situational awareness and building trust with partners, both within our institution and outside our institution. I know that's broad and vague, but I think that's really key for us to consider how then we can then apply that in all of our JCCs as this, you know, post 10/7 reality evolves in the JResponse applications. But I want to open it up. I want to echo what Joseph just asked and open it up to everyone on this call. Feel free to unmute, or, you know, Jess and Jesse, you could help with the facilitation. We want to hear different voices. What have you done? What are you struggling with? What have you learned from this conversation? So we can all learn from your perspective.
Well, to be fair, that position always excuse me. Of course, as I unmute, then I have to clap. I wanted to share some resources as well as you guys are thinking about the answers to Mark's question. Contingency planning is something that I've heard from our panelists as being really important and the whole group as we're talking about different situations. And I think we've all become very prepared for the what if. And planning around that. But also I want to share, I'm sure everyone's just in the thick of it as I am, but the NSGP, the FEMA grant, the current cycle is open right now, and that's all state dependent as to what when that closes for you and what specific needs are. But there's some amazing resources to support in filling out those applications. And if you ever need any additional support, please let me know. Would be more than happy to have a call and talk through how we can make sure we're all getting that NSGP dollar for our security.
Thank you, Jess. So opening it up.
I know we're opening it up
Hey.
to everyone else. Oh, go ahead, Paul. Sorry.
Oh, so yeah, you know what? Yeah, just like everyone else, it's nice to say, yeah, it has been a challenge. It's nice to acknowledge that, like, this is not easy. None of this has been easy. And sometimes there will be disagreements with people that we work with, people that we care about, people who attend our center. Sometimes they're having that fight entirely without us. And none of it's easy. But it's good to have each other's backs. It's good to have resources and people who are thinking about how we best support each other. And sometimes even if you don't have the answer, it's nice to know that there are people working on the answer. So I'm glad that we have each other, and I'm glad that we have an organization like this, which helps all sorts of JCCs help us have each other's backs. So that's just sort of what I want to say about that.
Thank you, Paul. It's important. I think I saw, was it Betsy that tried to speak before?
It was actually me, Naomi.
Oh, Naomi, go for it.
Yes, I was just going to say, in terms of the resilience piece, and I can't say that we did this perfectly. Sherry and Paul can attest to this because they both worked with me. But some of the things that have been somewhat successful for us with resilience is giving staff the space, whether it was with a mental health professional or just to come together, just the space to be themselves and not be working on something. So we did bring in an Israeli mental health professional who speaks English, who has a lot of training in crisis management and recovery, to meet with the staff to give them an opportunity to sort of talk about what's going on for each of them. And we opened it up to anybody who wanted to come, and we had a nice group who came and just had a chance to, whether again it's that commiserate or just speak to one another, and be together. And then we've had a few social opportunities, which in the moment doesn't feel like that's maybe the best way to be resilient, but sometimes just having an opportunity to sort of unplug and be together has been really helpful for our staff to sort of continue to cope and just that like care for each other. There might be other organizations that have done really great things who want to share too.
Sherry, I think you may have had your hand up as well, and I think Naomi gave you a really great segue to jump in here too.
Okay, I have to be really honest. I've been dealing with this situation and somebody just walked into my office. I didn't hear the segue, but thanks, Naomi. But what I wanted to say was coming from an early childhood perspective, and Naomi, if you want to tell me what the segue was, if I completely missed it, but coming from an early childhood perspective, something that's been really fascinating to me is, and in Toronto, we have a Jewish ECE directors, not all the directors are Jewish, but Jewish ECE directors cohort that meets through our local Jewish Federation. And it's been very interesting to me, the difference between our families and some of the families at other centers. And it's been very, almost polarized, because you have the families that are like, we're going to bring in guns and we're going to patrol and we're going to do all of that. And then you've got the other families that are like, life goes on, let's just deal. And the ones that are super hyper worried about how their children are dealing with this, even though the children seem quite oblivious, and the ones who don't seem to know that anything's going on at all. So I think the most important thing since October 7th for us, and this has been reflected in our agency as well, is the copious amount of communication that we've been doing with our families, with our members, with our staff, keeping them in the loop. Even if we don't think anything's going to come of it, we hear a rumor about a potential, protest, or something else happened in Israel that we're concerned, maybe we'll get, it'll be blowback will come, in North America. I'm sorry, it's been a day. My mouth and my brain aren't totally connecting. Naomi knows, I think this is the third meeting we've been in together today. And just balancing all of that, making sure we're giving the information, because I think that's almost the most important thing, is for people to know that we know, we're aware, we're here, we're looking after it as much as we can, and that we're talking to the people that we need to talk to make sure it's being looked after, whatever that means. And so that's sort of what I've learned from all of this. And I kind of came, even after coming off of COVID, in the early childhood field in general, that communication with parents. And I realized how important that is since October 7th. Doesn't matter whether it's for someone who has a child or someone who's a senior or anybody in between, just knowing that we know and that we're there. So I have no idea how that relates to what Naomi said, but that's what I wanted to say.
I think that was perfect, Sherry, and thank you so much for sharing with us. I think one of the correlations that you made was communication and what you did during COVID versus what's going on now. And I think that's, I'm sure something that other people have found as well. I know at our JCC, we had a decision-making matrix during COVID that we used for each decision that we made and what we were going to be doing. And we've actually just recently adjusted that to be a security decision-making matrix, and found that there were a ton of similarities with what we did and why we make decisions now and what we share, and how we look at it from a big picture. Not only what are we doing as an agency, but what are our families going to think? What are the community members going to think? And when they don't think the same thing, how are we having successful conversations with the why? So thank you. I appreciate you sharing, and it was absolutely perfect.
Len, I see your hands up. Did you have something else you wanted to add?
Actually, I just want to echo the past two statements on communication. We're not over communicating, but we're giving exact communication, which dispels rumors. And rumors is our main problem. Somebody heard this, somebody heard that. To get the exact information out to the community builds trust, and it stops dissension. And the arguments that we've been talking about can happen when the right information is not given out. Bottom line, those were great comments that you guys made.
It's true. Don't you ask what's happening in camp?
Does anybody else want to jump in with any of their experiences? I can tell you in Newport News, Virginia, we have never had such a amazing relationship with our police and our fire department and everybody else. I know that all started with the pandemic and everything else, and really that readiness element has really just been amazing. In fact, our executive director is Shomer Shabbos, and he did not even know about the October 7th attacks until after Shabbos, when he turned his phone on and saw that the mayor, the chief of police, and like 6 other people aside from the city were trying to contact him and make sure. Our local police and fire department have gone above and beyond, and we've thrown quite a few celebratory and appreciation brunches for them, which is also really nice because our staff gets a good bagel with a schmear. So anything that we can do to keep those community relationships building is amazing.
Does anyone else have any comments? Otherwise, Jesse, if you wanna, you can transition to me if you would like. I'm just really, really happy that not only did we have, you know, so many people in this conversation, but so many people still in this conversation almost an hour in. I want to do a closing with all of us, but I want to say a couple of things first as I reflect on where JResponse is now. I'm dressed up a little bit because I'm was in part of JC Association board meetings, and part of my role now is to help bring J Summit to life. J Summit used to be called Biennial, and the last time our lay leadership got together with execs was 6 years ago in Memphis, where JResponse had its pilot cohort, where Len and Joseph were. It was a year before I had the pleasure of and honor of becoming the JResponse director. And now we look at ourselves 6 years later, having gone through natural disasters, medical disasters, rise in anti-Semitism, what's been happening over the past year, and JResponse now has all of you and all of us, and 200 more of us that are not on this call, thinking about and acting on resilience, relief, recovery, and readiness. And this peer community was created a little over a year ago. So there was a constant conversation happening among this group. And this is actually the first time that we've gathered in 2024. So I want you to lean into this peer community. I want to give tremendous kavod honor to Jesse and Jess, who have stepped up and been incredible community chairs. And I hope you'll continue to do so for at least a little while, but a plug for others to jump in as well. And just to remind you what you've heard on this call, and I think I will probably a follow-up email on the JResponse communications as well, that there's trainings available that we're amplifying. There's grants available. There's more of these peer communities. We were to have a train the trainer JResponse experience this year. We're going to do it in 2025. Some other things came up this year. We're already talking to Joseph and the team in Asheville about hosting. And hopefully we'll have more opportunities for folks to come to Israel as well. And I want to, you know, not only elevate what's happening now with Israel Academy and other opportunities, but ProCon's going to come back, and we'll do engagement at ProCon in October of 2025 in Minneapolis. There are a lot of things to do, and we're not going to complete all of them. And I want to leave us with a challenge based on a Jewish text. And because I'm on my phone, because I forgot my computer this morning, because that's happened sometimes, I can't put it on my screen. But I'm going to tell you from Pirkei Avot, Lo alecha hamlacha ligmor, v'lo ata ben chorin lehabil mimena. And if you're not extremely well versed in Hebrew, I will tell you, which I know probably most of us, even I wouldn't know the translation unless I looked at it. It is, you are not free, you are not obligated to complete the work, nor are you free to desist from it. The work of building resilience in others, the work of preparation, the work of relief and recovery will never be completed, but that doesn't mean we're free to stop. So I encourage you to put in the chat, what is one thing that we've talked about this hour, or one thing on your plate, perhaps JResponse related, that is something that you may not complete ever or get all the way, but you're not free to desist from it, that you're going to focus on. Put that in the chat. Have everyone, and you read the other ones that are coming in through the chat. What is something that you might not ever complete, but you know that you're not free to desist from, that you are going to focus on after this call? I want to honor Aaron, sent a really nice message too that you all should read. Resilience, going to work on making sure we have some gas in the tank. That includes me. Staff education and forum for staff. Where did it go? Related to challenges of that movement, striving to build a resilient and courageous community, putting my oxygen mask on first. This is your reminder to put your oxygen mask on first, take those deep breaths, do that meditation, go for that walk, text a friend to tell them you love them. All of the things that we talked about in JResponse training, they're there for you, and we're here for you. If you're feeling stuck, reach out to us and reach out to each other. This peer community will reconvene again soon. Jesse and I will do that work. But just so proud and honored to be connected with all of you, not only doing the jobs you were assigned to do, but going above and beyond and being a JResponder. Jess and Jesse, back to you.
I want to say thank you to everyone. It means so much to me when we're able to come together. As Mark said, if there's ever a time where you want to be a part of even just planning one meeting, we would love to have your voice. We would love to have what you would like to be hearing more of. I think we got a great response from having a panel, so we will utilize that in the future to have more voices with us each and every meeting. Thank you. Be proud of yourself and take care of yourself. I think those are words that we're seeing in the chat that are just so important. And I wish you the best week. And I can't wait to tell you all about Israel after JResponse is there at the end of the month. So thank you for sharing and coming.
And I'd like to give one more shout out to Naomi, Joseph, and Len, who have been fantastic in all my emails telling them what to prepare. And we really appreciate all three of you, and your willingness to share means a lot to us. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful week. Bye, everybody.